Chapter 516. A sense of exhilaration. Many within the Cloud River battlefield chose to keep their faces masked to hide their identities. As ubiquitous as they were practical, masks, in all the varying designs and cost, were helpful in concealing identities, allowing many, especially in circumstances where transparency was unwise, to transform into faceless silhouettes that blended and vanished amongst the crowd to preserve their anonymity. Strangely, He Bing held a unique disdain and disgust for such trappings, and with the power he wielded, he was trying to impose his will on Lu Yi and the others. "I'll count to 3, he commanded, his tone ice-cold. "Remove your masks." He would have charged forward without a word if not for the geographical disadvantage the moment he realized that the newcomers were enemies. That the newcomers had arrived in a group was all he needed to know that they must be weaker than he was. He had defeated many such enemies before despite the numerical disadvantage, and few had managed to put up what could be worthy of a fair battle. 1. 2. Li Baxin reached to remove his mask, resignation etched on his concealed face as he sighed helplessly. He was such an indomitable presence in the Spirit Creek battlefield, and there was hardly anyone who did not fear the name Li Baxin of the devoted ones. Still, here he was, as weak as any novice could be in this new world. Like lightning flashing across a calm sky, Lu Yi burst forward from behind Li Baxin, his gleaming blade sending an arc of light hurtling toward He Bing. "Impudence!" He Bing boomed, indignant at their defiance. He lifted his spear to retaliate, the weapon effortlessly shattering the incandescent scythe of light. Rage came in waves. Even despite the odds, these puny voles dared to attack him first when he had not. His cold eyes took in the audacious challenger, a mere third order, judging by the glow emanating from him, who was already sprinting at him, and he cracked into a wicked grin. A third order? Is this fool wishing for his own death? He mused. He could easily blast the challenger to death with just one blow. But a flutter of spiritual power from behind caused him to pause. Someone was behind him. His focus had been centered on Lu Yi the whole time, and it was too late. Something dark shrouded him, and by the time he regained his senses, he found himself lost in a completely different environment, ensnared in an unfamiliar rocky terrain. He Bing's visage twisted with confusion. He did not know what just happened and what had caused the cave to vanish, replaced by the eerie forest that now surrounded him. Back in the cave, he materialized, holding aloft the mystical 9-realm scroll with the drawings of a rocky sprawl etched upon its surface. Right in the center of the sprawl was the image of a solitary figure, unmistakably He Bing, still spinning around, completely confused. Being stuck here because of the failure of escaping using the teleportation ward in such a dangerous predicament with a formidable 7th order to contend with was not Lu Ye's nor his companion's idea of fun. Lu Yi knew fully well how dire and desperate the situation was, and so did the others. They understood that He Bing's delay in initiating combat was due to his inability to gauge their cultivation ranks at first. Had he perceived their relative weakness, he would have struck without a second thought. Thus, they planned their course of action. When Li Baxin stepped forward to shield Lu Yi, the latter made a subtle gesture by tapping on the miniaturized Amber's head, a silent message communicated through years of shared trials and understanding with Yi. That was when he slipped away, reappearing behind He Bing like a wisp of smoke. With Lu Yi keeping He Bing distracted, Yi sprung her trap, unfurling the 9-realm scroll. A spirit treasure more potent than any spirit artifact weapon, its might increased as Yi's cultivation grew. That, plus the element of surprise, was what helped to ensnare the mighty He Bing within it. In spite of everything, this was an outcome they would have preferred. Fighting in the cavern risked catastrophic collapse, or even attracting the attention of other formidable entities like Wei Ke of the Thousand Demon Ridge. The 9-realm scroll could contain whatever damage sustained inside, limiting the risks as long as Yi could endure it. As soon as He Bing was ensnared, Lu Yi bolted forward towards Yi, followed closely by Li Baxin and Feng Yuechan. They did not know what just happened, but their confused expressions soon morphed into determination as they decided to follow Lu Yi. He flapped the scroll and all 3 of them vanished, their forms now joining He Bing within the image of the rocky sprawl, appearing on the parchment surface. Deep in the spread of rocky terrain inside the Nine Realms scroll pocket dimension, He Bing watched as his opponents appeared one after another. He finally grasped his predicament, realizing where he was at last, the pocket dimension of a ward scroll. He had lived long enough, amassing sufficient skills, awareness, and experiences to learn about that from the sudden changes in the surroundings and how his opponents had reappeared. His eyes narrowed, acknowledging the fact that he faced not 3, but 4 adversaries. The fourth had been hiding in the shadows and was most likely the one wielding the ward scroll now. While fear gripped his heart, a thrill of anticipation also coursed through him. A ward scroll was a priceless artifact. In spite of their low rank in cultivation, He Bing was surprised that his opponents were in possession of such an extraordinary item. If he could defeat them, the ward scroll could be his. No longer hesitating, He Bing made his move, charging toward Lu Yi first and foremost. The decision was an easy one. Lu Yi had already exposed himself as a third order, for ranks well below He Bing. Brimming with confidence, He Bing believed that he could eliminate Lu Yi with a single strike. With great speed, he covered more than 10 meters in just 2 strides, reaching Lu Yi in the blink of an eye as he thrust his spear forward. Such a straightforward attack, but it gave Lu Yi an immense and panicky sense of crisis. His entire self tensed as Inviolable screamed out of its sheath with a ringing cry. Spiritual power surged down the length of its blade as Lu Yi slashed the weapon in an upward slash to meet the incoming spear tip. Lu Yi's eyes constricted the moment steel clashed. The blow came heavy and forceful, and for a split second, Lu Yi felt like his weapon had hit a solid rock boulder instead. The spear tip was barely deflected at all from its lethal trajectory. A precipice of life or death in one solitary exchange. Such was the force of an attack delivered by a 7th order, and it was clear that He Bing had yet to unleash his full might. The 4th and the 7th orders each represented 2 critical thresholds in the Spirit Creek realm. Cultivators who made it past these 2 orders would find themselves experiencing a significant escalation of one's strength, and the same principle applied within the Cloud River realm as well. Therefore, only cultivators beyond the 7th order realm possessed both the ability and audacity to venture into the Colosseum alone. Nevertheless, there were exceptions to this rule. There were also 6th orders who fancied their chances solo, such as the one Lu Yi and he had defeated together earlier. The luminescent shield of runes of glyph protection materialized in front of Lu Yi as he contorted himself backward as much as possible. The spear grazed past him, annihilating the glowing shield in its wake, while leaving a searing trail of pain across Lu Yi's neck as he nearly tumbled from the blow. And before Lu Yi could regain his footing, He Bing's spear, having failed to find its initial mark, descended like a crushing rod about to bash his skull. With a resounding thud, Lu Yi found himself slammed onto the ground with numbing waves of pain spreading from his shoulder blade down to his lower abdomen. A flicker of surprise sparked in He Bing's eyes. Evidently, he was not expecting a 3rd order to survive that blow. Yet, that was the extent of his surprise. With Lu Yi smashed into the ground, his spiritual power in complete disarray, and his movements momentarily paralyzed, he was a sitting duck. He Bing's spear was wheeling back for another powerful thrust that would have skewered Lu Yi like a boar when a sonorous whistle filled the air. Several menacing waves of death laced with murderous choler and aggression bore down upon him from behind. Sword Cultivator. He Bing swiftly discerned the nature of the assailant bearing down on him, acknowledging that while his 3 opponents were not on par with him in terms of cultivation, he knew better than to discount the deadliness that sword cultivators were so famous for. In a hurried response, He Bing whirled around to face his attackers, his gaze meeting a sky filled with luminescent flying shafts. He immediately rattled his long spear, setting off a symphony of blooming silhouettes shaped like the tip of his spear. The resounding clangor of metal on metal echoed through the surroundings as sparks erupted and danced. Every incoming shaft was deftly deflected, their onslaught momentarily held at bay. Amid the hail of radiantly glowing shafts, streaking spells spiraled around seamlessly, integrating with the flying bolts of light in a relentless and ceaseless assault, an unending tempest of deadly artistry. Li Baxian and Feng Yuechan had spent their formative years together, their bond forged from shared experiences of growth and cultivation. For the sake of Li Baxian, who had become her childhood sweetheart, Feng Yuechan was willing to linger in the Spirit Creek realm for over a decade, suffering a stagnation in her progress when she could have achieved more. This shared history manifested in a formidable partnership, flawless and impeccably coordinated. The gravity of the situation was not lost on He Bing as he noticed an unsettling detail. The sword and the spell cultivators were both a step above the combat cultivator in terms of rank, each evidently fourth orders. Yet, the depth of their mastery and skill seemed to exceed He Bing's own level. All three of them must be acolytes of renowned sects or orders, and their prowess clearly a hallmark of their status as elites. Strangely, this revelation, while daunting, stirred a sense of exhilaration within He Bing. His roots lay in a modest Tier 4 sect. Even though he had advanced into the Cloud River realm with all 360 spiritual points unlocked, He Bing was aware of his inferior standing in comparison to the true prodigies, those whose name had once been on the Spirit Creek battlefield's roll of supremacy while his own name had been notably absent. Yet right here, right now, he found himself securely in possession of the initiative in this fight against three formidable adversaries. If this were a fight where all of them were equals in cultivation ranks, he would not have stood a chance at all. Not even in single combat against any of these adversaries. So what if they came from prestigious backgrounds? So what if they possessed superior talents? Nothing could trump the sheer difference in their cultivation rank. Nevertheless, he could not shake off an uncanny familiarity that never stopped nagging at him. Some time before, or somewhere unknown, he felt as if he had seen the sword cultivator and the spell cultivator. While Li Baxian and Feng Yuechan held He Bing in a tight deadlock, Lu Yi quickly scrambled to his feet and extricated himself from the immediate vicinity. Wiping a hand across his scarlet-drenched neck, he felt the slickness and heat of his own blood on his hand. He recognized the close shave he had just had, the dangerous proximity of He Bing's lethal spear and the monumental risk of facing a seventh order all by himself as a third order. He would have been killed if he were any slower. Go! He Bing unleashed a guttural bark. Several streaks of light, the telltale glow that flying weapons emitted, burst to life abruptly. They sliced through the chaotic whirlwind of flying swords and spells and hurtled toward Li Baxian and Feng Yuechan. Neither Li Baxian nor Feng Yuechan had the audacity to stand in direct opposition to such an onslaught. Feng Yuechan produced her umbrella-like spell artifact. Unfurling its protective expanse before them, they braced themselves for the incoming cascading impact. When the flying weapons hit, each of their powerful strikes against the luminescent shield of the umbrella-like spell artifact pummeled Feng Yuechan with one piecemeal step, eliciting protesting flares of brilliance from the umbrella. Surviving the barrage, they looked up to find He Bing successfully penetrating beyond the shafts of light, charging headlong into them. Li Baxian brandished his sword. The weapon trembled in his grip as if recalling the legion of glowing shafts that instantly regrouped around him, coalescing into a dragon-like monstrosity to counter He Bing. Both figures threw themselves into each other, but as soon as they met, the dragon burst into countless sparkling white cinders while Li Baxian careened away, crashing to the ground like a rag doll. Chapter 517, And Who Might You Be? He Bing persisted unwaveringly in the pursuit of his quarry with the doggedness of a shark on the scent of blood, his spear thrusting towards the descending figure of Li Baxian with the ferocity and deadliness of a pit viper, poised to kill and maim. Feng Yuechan's being brimmed with surging spiritual power. A dense mist manifested around her instantly, its appearance precipitously plummeting the ambient temperature. Unaware of the impending danger, He Bing recklessly charged headlong into the frigid atmosphere. The cold air congealed into ice, its crystalline tendrils spreading outward with the intent to encase He Bing in an icy prison. Had they been of equal cultivation levels, breaking free from this spell would have proven nigh impossible. Yet, He Bing's cultivation outstripped Feng Yuechan by at least 3 ranks. Sensing the looming threat, he shook his body, and with waves of surging spiritual power from him, the encasing ice crystals shattered into fragments. His gaze panned to the disheveled Feng Yuechan not far away. At his mental direction, his flying weapons screamed straight for her like a flock of vultures and swooped down with the force of a battering ram, slamming furiously into her umbrella-like spell artifact. The impact sent Feng Yuechan hurtling backward before crashing to the ground ignominiously. "Enjoy playing the savior, huh?" He Bing snarled, grinding his teeth as he darted forth, homing in on Feng Yuechan with a murderous collar. Enveloped in the dazzling illumination of his glowing shafts, Li Baxian bolted forward to intercept. Simultaneously, Lu Yi was launching an assault of his own on He Bing from behind with inviolable blazing crimson red along the length of its steel in what was a concerted pincer attack on the enemy. However, despite their seamless coordination, the colossal disparity between their cultivation ranks and He Bing's remained insurmountable. In no more than 3 exchanges of blows, both Lu Yi and Li Baxian were sent hurtling through the air with blood spurting forth from their wounds. Feng Yuechan's spell once again surged forth, preventing He Bing from delivering more damage to them. Back inside the underground cavern, he clutched the 9-realm scroll in her hands firmly, channeling her spiritual power into it with unwavering desperation, her anxious gaze fixated upon the dynamic interplay of the figures incessantly weaving back and forth amid the furious clash within the confines of the scroll's pocket dimension. Anxiety mounting to the point of panic, she could only sit on her own hands as she witnessed the intensity of the battle unfolding before her. Her current cultivation rank in the Cloud River realm was the highest she had ever accomplished. In theory, by being in control of the 9-realm scroll, she should have been able to provide some form of assistance to Lu Yi and the others. Nevertheless, the ferocity of the ongoing battle now being waged in the scroll's pocket dimension left her feeling powerless. The sheer force of the clash between 4 Cloud River realm cultivators set the scroll into violent tremors, compelling her to exert every ounce of her strength to maintain its operation. Any faltering in the supply of her spiritual power to keep the 9-realm scroll operating and He Bing would escape. To that end, she did not dare to act rashly, and that left her only with the option of maintaining her control of the 9-realm scroll while praying that her companions would triumph. Back inside the messy sprawl of rock columns and debris that was the scroll's pocket dimension, Lu Yi and Li Baxian were blitzing at He Bing again and again. Yet each time they were met with such formidable resistance from the 7th-order enemy that they were collecting more wounds than doling out them. Feng Yuechan was faring somewhat better, although she was not going easy just yet. Unleashing spells with hardly any signs of respite, she was fully aware that any sign of a letdown would spell the demise of Lu Yi and Li Baxian. Whether Lu Yi, Li Baxian, or even Feng Yuechan, none of them had ever experienced perils as deadly as this. Teetering on the edge of a precipice of death, all 3 of them were aware that one little mistake could lead to irreversible disaster. In the meantime, He Bing's earlier contemptuous expression slowly receded from his face. Whatever superiority he still wielded, the battle was hardly going the way he expected. What he initially anticipated as a one-sided slaughter since he ascertained the cultivation ranks of his adversaries had turned out to be a surprising performance of impeccable resistance. Looking at the overall situation, even if these 3 teamed up, they were no match for him. Although he was alone, he still had the upper hand due to his strong cultivation. However, in reality, he had difficulty killing any of these 3. Whenever he thought that he was about to put down one of them for good, the other 2 would dive in with reckless abandon to thwart him. This was especially true of the sword cultivator, whose flying shafts of light had been a constant nuisance if not a threat to him. Several times he had toyed with the notion of going the extra mile of killing the sword cultivator and risking being heavily injured. But his reservations got the better of him, and he could only go on allowing this debacle to go on. After all, being injured in the Colosseum would mean that he would have to sit out the rest of the duration to recuperate and heal. At any rate, the situation was increasingly favorable for him. Both the sword and the combat cultivators were getting weaker and slower from their worsening injuries. It would not be long before one of them crumbled to the ground for good, and he would have no trouble dealing with the remaining 2. If someone had told him before today that a few 3rd and 4th orders would put up such a good fight against him, he would have casually dismissed the notion with nothing but a disdainful scoff. Yet, right here, right now, the truth was right before his very eyes, proving him wrong. Unbelievable! All three adversaries must be of notable repute, particularly the sword and spell cultivator. The more he clashed with them, the more an uncanny sense of familiarity washed over him. Another intense exchange of blows saw Li Baxin and Lu Yi successively repulsed one after another. Even before he landed, the mask of a boy's face that Li Baxin wore cracked and shattered, revealing a gash on his forehead where blood began dribbling out. Had he not swiftly retreated, the injury would have been more than just a mere cut above his brows. His very skull might have been impaled by the tip of He Bing's spear. Plus, Lu Ye's saber had arced around just in time to parry the blow, and that allowed the opening for Li Baxin to evade. The pieces of the broken mask fell to the ground, exposing Li Baxin's stony countenance. He could see no glimmer of victory in sight, given the circumstances, but that did not mean that he was going to give up just yet. With a sideswipe of his spear that blasted aside another one of Feng Yuechan's death bolts, He Bing cast his gaze upon Li Baxin's face. He was startled for 1 second before he exclaimed, visibly shocked and surprised, "You are Li Baxin." That was when he realized that the sense of familiarity that has been bugging him was not misplaced. Li Baxin, of all people? As a former Spirit Creek Realm cultivator who once roamed the Spirit Creek battlefield, there was no way he wouldn't know the renown of Li Baxin, the Heaven-8 monstrosity who once dominated the upper echelons of the battlefield's role of supremacy that even those whose names were on the roll regarded him with terror. Even He Bing himself once watched Li Baxin from afar with admiration and envy. He was no stranger to the rumors about how Li Baxin's damage to his spiritual points was what prevented his ascension to becoming a Heaven-9 cultivator, but he did not know that Li Baxin had finally stepped into the Cloud River battlefield. That would explain why he had been fighting against an adversary of such profound skill and fundamentals. It was Li Baxin. That must mean that you're Feng Yuechan? He Bing turned his gaze to the side. Deducing the identity of Feng Yuechan, having confirmed Li Baxin's profile, posed no difficulty. Their inseparability was well known to all, along with the fact that she was a spell cultivator. He Bing directed his attention to Lu Yi at last. "And who might you be?" he asked. The pieces were beginning to fit into place. The renowned Li Baxin and Feng Yuechan, who after more than a decade of remaining in the Spirit Creek realm, would possess such impeccable skill and proficiency displayed in the skirmish earlier. But what about this stranger in the mask of a long-fanged demon? Despite being one rank lower than Li Baxin and Feng Yuechan in cultivation, his strength and skill were on par with theirs. But Lu Yi had hardly the inclination to respond to the question. Seizing the moment, he used the moment to gather his strength. He was drenched with blood from head to toe. While the wounds that scattered all over him were nowhere near grave yet, the sheer number of the wounds was enough to have crippled anyone else. Even the back of his hand that now gripped the hilt of his weapon was torn with fresh blood flowing down his hand and onto the steel of his saber. No matter, an unperturbed He Bing responded when he received no answer. Who would have thought that the renowned Li Baxin and Feng Yuechan would meet their demise at my hands? He grinned broadly. How ironic is fate. Certain of his victory, He Bing advanced. He vanished in 1 second only to reappear just in front of Li Baxin in the next. Exuding an air of certainty regarding their defeat, he advanced and in an instant materialized before Li Baxin. His spear shot up with the speed and intensity of a lashing serpent, aiming straight for Li Baxin's head. The sword cultivator posed the greatest threat to him and thus had to be eliminated first. At the same time, Lu Yi and Feng Yuechan reacted swiftly. The former pounced upon him from behind, while the latter fired another spell. The legion of flying shafts surged after He Bing in a terrible deluge, yet even with their sheer number and might, He Bing's spear prevailed. With each swing of the long polearm, he swept aside the currents of flying shafts pouring at him before driving it up into Li Baxin's face. Li Baxin had not even the slightest intention to flinch. He held his sword straight, its tip aimed at his foe. Next, he vanished, swallowed by a sudden burst of radiance that turned into a shaft of light of its own that shot forward to charge at the enemy. The atmosphere instantly turned palpably thick with the radiation from both their blows, Li Baxin's fearless charge and He Bing's formidable thrust. as both figures brushed past each other in a split-second exchange of attacks. Li Baxian screeched to a halt more than a dozen meters away. He crumbled to one knee, his hand clutching his abdomen. Crimson blood oozed through his fingers. On the other hand, He Bing's cheek was a grotesque mess of mushy flesh and blood. The pain ignited furious anger within him. How could this have happened? A mere fourth order who could hurt him? He Bing dismissed Feng Yuechan's incoming death bolt with a smack of his spear, shattering it into oblivion. Next, he pivoted around and bolted after Li Baxian, his icy resolve to kill now set in stone. But one stride was all he managed before Lu Yi appeared from his flank with inviolable bearing down on him, its sharp edge glinting dangerously. "Get out of my sight!" He Bing snarled angrily, his spear rising to swat Lu Yi aside. Their steels clashed, and it was then He Bing realized that something had changed. The third-order stranger had grown swifter and stronger all of a sudden. Several resounding clashes ensued, and Lu Yi was finally flung backward. He landed beside Li Baxian, his right arm throbbing incessantly despite inviolable still in his grip. But He Bing appeared perplexed. He was sure that a single strike would suffice to repel Lu Yi. At least that was the case before. Yet, just now, Lu Yi had managed to parry several thrusts of his spear. His strength seemed to have undergone a tremendous, inexplicable, and even undeniably abnormal surge. He glanced at Lu Yi, beholding a strange sight. There was Lu Yi, swathed in a crimson layer of spiritual power roiling with blood-made energy. The energies churned like rolling flames. Amber, who had been perched on his shoulder all along, was supplying more blood-made energy to Lu Yi, shrouding him in a dusky red luminescence. What on earth is that? Some unknown technique? What He Bing failed to see, without the help of any spiritual vision-based abilities, was a blood-red glyph hovering right over Lu Yi's chest, working its magic. Lu Yi seldom used glyph, blood rage. It had been a while since he had encountered any enemies who had given him cause for such a bitter struggle. Most, if not all of them, were either so feeble that they barely withstood more than one attack from him, or it was he who was defeated that way. Blood rage required time to gradually build up its effect for any results to show, and that made it difficult and inconvenient to harness. But this battle had been a unique experience for him. A battle against such a powerful enemy would have been decided in a second if it were single combat. Yet, with Li Baxian and Feng Yuechan present to fight alongside him, this had turned into a chance for blood rage to prove its worth. Right when the battle first began, Lu Yi had constructed the glyph over his own chest. The wounds that he collected and the blood that he had lost, all of them had helped blood rage to channel to its fullest, and that had engendered a profound transformation in his strength and power. He might still be a third order, but the power he now unleashed could match what fourth orders could. Given enough time, blood rage could give him an augmentation in his power that could equal fifth orders or even higher. Once he could go toe-to-toe against He Bing, he could change the outcome, rather than being just a desperate attempt to survive. Whatever reservations He Bing harbored, he dismissed them all. He had come too far to allow any second thoughts to come in the way of winning this battle. No one would falter at this juncture. It was either to win or to die. Li Baxian rose to his feet, getting up beside Lu Yi. With his spiritual power, he staunched the wounds that beset him. His wounds pulsated with morbid vigor, writhing and convulsing as if in protest to the healing, while his sinews slithered to repair themselves. The airborne shafts now scattered everywhere swiftly converge under his command. Pointing his long sword at the enemy with steely resolve, he croaked hoarsely, "Advance." In unison, the two figures darted valiantly forward, attacking He Bing from both flanks. Feng Yuchan began letting loose one flurry of spells after another, not seeking to kill or to maim, but to disperse the focus of the enemy and relieve as much strain from Li Baxian and Lu Yi as possible. Chapter 518. The Secret Technique of the Myriad Beast Domain. The embers of battle rekindled once again. Only this time, He Bing was no longer as confident and calm as he was before, for he was now certain of Lu Yi's growth in his prowess. It was as Lu Yi expected. The earlier onset of the battle was a struggle for their survival. But now, they possessed the means to turn the tables, even if the means were short-lived. The elevation in Lu Ye's power did not come without its cost. It was fueled by his own vitality that blood rage tapped into. Wielding the strength and power of a fourth order, Lu Ye could deliver strokes faster and stronger than before. All of that would naturally inflict a certain degree of strain on his body. In this state, he could only keep on fighting for less than half his normal duration. Once the time limit expired, he would be depleted. But if they lacked the means to put up an equal fight, then all other considerations would be futile. The heightened strength and speed Lu Ye was showing did not go unnoticed by He Bing. Li Baxian was equally aware of it. He did not know what had Lu Ye done, but it undeniably helped to tilt the scales in their favor, and that called for an immediate alteration in their previous strategy. The battle against He Bing started with Lu Ye in a supporting role. But now, Lu Ye would be leading the attack with Li Baxian rotating into the supporting role to rectify any gaps in their defense. Additionally, with Feng Yuechan to help divert He Bing's attention, the battle has effectively transformed into anyone's game. This time, they would no longer be easily repelled by He Bing like before. With Lu Ye at the forefront, they now had the capability to exchange blows with the Seventh Order on almost equal grounds. Especially, since the scales were tipping more in their favor with each passing second. In the meantime, He Bing was growing increasingly despondent. His enemies possessed cultivation ranks far lower than his own. He had every confidence of winning them all in single combat. It would take only 10 seconds. In fact, he would have done that if it were just 2 enemies. But there were 3. The 2 would ceaselessly rain hails of attacks on him in close range, while the third would pepper him relentlessly with spells while maintaining her distance. All that was putting him in quite a fix. What should have been a one-sided beatdown presided by him was thwarted by their seamless collaboration. Instead of killing at least one of them, they were now slowly gaining up on him. Especially the Third Order combat cultivator. He Bing did not know what really happened, but somehow, the Third Order was getting stronger the longer the fight went on. At present, they possessed the capability to threaten him. Before too long, they might even be able to truly defeat him. He Bing seethed with frustration. Had he known about this, he would have rather risked severe injury just so that he could kill or incapacitate one of the 3 at least. That would have spared him the fate of being ensnared in this stalemate that could very well end up in his defeat. But the opportunity no longer presented itself. The gambit of risking injury just to kill one of them would never work now. Doing so would be tantamount to suicide at this juncture, He Bing believed. Hence, it was one option that he would never undertake. Whatever the combat cultivator had done to generate such a surge in his power had to come with a price. Therefore, He Bing was confident that all he needed to do was wait for the moment when the combat cultivator could no longer endure the price that sustained the enhancement in his power. That would mark the moment of his final victory. With that in mind, He Bing brandished his spear, forsaking offense for defense. The fact that he, a formidable Seventh Order, was compelled to make such a choice proved an immense humiliation. Nevertheless, a beggar could not be a chooser. So long as he emerged victorious, how he clinched that victory would hold little significance. At any rate, he was fighting against the 2 of the most famous cultivators ever to walk the Spirit Creek battlefield, the renowned Li Baxian and Feng Yuechan. By He Bing only defending and not attacking, Lu Ye and Li Baxian would find their attacks useless. Neither of them would be able to penetrate his defenses, let alone deal any significant damage. The streaking radiance of spells being fired flickered incessantly in the dimly lit rocky sprawl, plus the occasional scythe-like energy projectiles and glowing shafts that crisscrossed the area. He Bing steadfastly stood his ground, swinging his polearm to parry and deflect whatever attacks that came his way, his presence looming like an eternal and indomitable iceberg that was impervious to any external threats. With glyph, blood rage continually operating, Lu Ye's power was nearing the levels of the Fifth Order. He had been observing He Bing's countenance. The Seventh Order was not looking flustered at all when the fight began. But now, He Bing was sporting a visibly more serious expression. He was investing his full power into defending every blow they were dishing his way. He could now more or less pose a credible threat to He Bing. In fact, if Lu Ye were a real Fifth Order, he might have been able to go toe-to-toe against He Bing and perhaps even win. But what he possessed right now was just the artificial power of the Fifth Order, which was inferior if compared to the might of a real Fifth Order. In fact, Lu Yi could feel that he had reached the limits of what enhancements blood rage could afford him. Which was understandably reasonable. There was no way the glyph had no limitation, especially after it had elevated his power by 2 ranks. That alone discounted any doubt as to glyph, blood rage's potency, despite its weakness that it needed time to channel before its enhancement could be significant enough to make any difference. More than 15 minutes had elapsed since they entered the pocket dimension of the 9-realm scroll, and that was what helped blood rage to reach its full potential. The collective might of all 3 of them could now resist He Bing. But they would still need more than that. He Bing was grateful for his own patience. Rather than succumbing to his panic, his decision to focus on defense had paid off, and he still had a lot of strength left. He was not surprised that Lu Yi had methods that could enhance his power. But what amazed him was the extent of growth in his power because of this unknown method. Yet, He Bing knew very well that the enhancement would not be without its cost. The higher the growth, the greater the cost must be. In fact, he could see that the enhancement had reached its limit. Lu Yi appeared to be at his peak at the moment, and all he had to do was just hold on. The clangor of steel reverberated through the air as Lu Yi and Li Baxian's figures intertwined like a pair of wraiths, yet nothing they did could penetrate He Bing's defenses. A sense of unease crept over Li Baxian. The current status quo might appear favorable, but he knew that perils still lurked unseen. More than 7/10 of the offense was now being shouldered by Lu Yi. Once glyph, blood rage had reached its time limit, their defeat would become inevitable. If only they could conclude this battle quickly. But with He Bing now choosing to defend rather than attack, he clearly intended to prolong the fight. But if they failed to end this battle before Lu Ye's power plummeted, then this would become their final resting place. Li Baxian still had one little trick hidden up his sleeve, but the final ace could only be used if he was absolutely sure that employing it would seal their victory, or else, using it would only cause more harm than good. Amidst the ferocious combat, Li Baxian cast a glance toward Lu Yi and found himself taken aback. Lu Yi looked completely unfazed, his countenance utterly devoid of any hint of impatience or panic. Every strike he made emanated focused effort, and Li Baxian felt inspired with the same calmness and composure. Indeed, if his junior brother could keep his cool despite the dire situation, why should he panic? As a more experienced cultivator than Lu Yi, he should be stronger than his junior. So what if they were to die here? Such was the life of being a cultivator. The revelation helped to restore a sense of peace and clarity in Li Baxian. At the same time, Li Baxian wondered if his senses were deceiving him. He was picking up a tinge of bestial power mingling within Lu Ye's aura. Even his movements betrayed a never-before-seen quality comparable to an untamed ferocious beast. Meanwhile, Lu Ye's mind was beginning to experience a change. Whatever sensation he felt, it defied description. Never had he experienced this surrealistic feeling before. The protracted duration of this battle and the passage of time had deepened his blood-energy link with Amber, intertwining and resonating inexplicably. This resonance exceeded the mere amalgamation of their blood energy. It entailed the fusion of his own spiritual power with Amber's mutant powers as a spirit beast. Gradually, this resonance left a vague and peculiar impression that Amber was a part of him, and this impression grew increasingly tangible. That was when he realized what was going on. He had never anticipated a breakthrough at this juncture. But the battle had dragged on for an extended duration, allowing him to accumulate ample confidence and experience and reach a point where he could unleash his true potential. The opponent he encountered in the Myriad Beast domain was very, very powerful, but the battle did not last long enough for Lu Yi to reach his full potential. A gleam of hope for victory glimmered in Lu Ye's eyes. And his attacks grew more ferocious. Undeniably, it was the beast-pact art that he acquired from the Myriad Beast domain that proved instrumental in this struggle. Since forming a bond with Amber through the life energy art, the tiger's mere presence alone could grant him tremendous assistance. Lu Yi would have long succumbed to exhaustion if it had not been for Amber. The power he drew from amber allowed him to swing his weapon without worrying about any strain and exertion. As the battle continued, the mingling of their blood energy and spiritual power propelled the Beast Pact art toward breakthrough and evolution. That came with the realization that glyph, blood rage, and the Beast Pact art could work in synergy. The resonance with amber grew stronger and deeper until a particular point when Lu Yi distinctly felt it, an unbreakable connection between him and amber. Amber was now an integral part of his very corporeal existence. Both man and tiger have become one. Beneath the folds of his tunic, the tiger head mark on his chest burst with a sudden radiant brilliance, followed by a beckoning, mysterious force. That was when amber pounced off Lu Ye's shoulder and transformed into a stream of light that surged down his chest and into the mark. Waves of energy pulsed from the mark, its power coursing through every fiber of Lu Ye's being and revitalizing what strength he had spent, plus the soreness and pain that came with using glyph, blood rage. Like an invigorating shower of magic, the waves of energy eradicated all fatigue from him, restoring him with renewed vitality. Every gash and bruise was gone. Even his throbbing right arm had ceased its trembling. The macabre glow that engulfed him was replaced by a resplendent orange radiance. Orange. The fusion of red, Lu Ye's blood energy and his spiritual power, and gold, amber's mutant energy. This newfound source of power manifested as a pair of ethereal tiger ears on his head and a tiger's tail at his back. The new appendage swayed gently, lifelike. The mightiest secret technique of the myriad beast domain, beast form. Chapter 519 He Bing Must Die. Beast masters were a crop of enigmatic and yet interesting cultivators. Jianghu's very own breed of beastmasters had strayed from the true essence of beast mastery by fixating on the acquisition and the taming and nurturing of spirit beasts to be used for battle while neglecting the cultivation of their own strength. As a result, the beastmasters of Jianghu lacked personal prowess. In their pursuit of numbers, many of them came to possess multiple spirit beasts, with some even boasting dozens or 20 of such creatures in their command. In the early stages of their cultivation, the beastmasters had succeeded in overpowering their opponents through sheer numerical advantage. This led them astray, gradually deviating from the right path. They became so engrossed in nurturing and controlling their spirit beasts that they neglected their own personal development. To that end, the beastmasters of Jianghu were not renowned for their superiority. In fact, they paled in comparison even to golem masters, who, despite their obsession with external elements, had not strayed from the purpose of enhancing their own abilities. Contrarily, the beastmasters of the myriad beast domain took an entirely different approach. They controlled only one spirit beast, one that was life-bound to them through magical seals known as beast pacts. If the methods of the beastmasters of Jianghu focused on the beasts, then the ones of the myriad beast domain prioritized their own cultivation, which should have been the actual and proper path for all beastmasters. And the pinnacle of beast mastery lay in the technique known as beast form. Back when Lu Yi was still in the myriad beast domain, deep within the underground insectoid nest of the Black Tortoise Sect territory, he encountered a beast, formed Niu Meng, who presented himself with the appearance of a formidable beast. That, plus the insectoid nucleus, allowed Niu Meng to embody an abundance of vitality. Single-handedly, he nearly annihilated an entire squad of cultivators consisting of Lu Yi and others. It was only with the instruction of the Grand Elder to break Niu Meng's beast pact to release him from his beast form that they stood a chance of defeating him. At the Ninth Order, just like Niu Meng, Zhou Hai, Peng Dehai, and Xia Qianqian each possessed considerable strength in their own right, especially Zhou Hai, who was known for his prowess with the sword. Yet their collective might, eclipsed by the might of Niu Meng's brute strength, did not prevent Zhou Hai from suffering massive abuse by Niu Meng, a testament to the tremendous power bestowed by the beast form technique. During their time in the secret realm of the myriad beast domain, Lu Yi had created a beast pact with Amber and had learned the secrets of beast form, although he had not yet found the opportunity to reach the state, until today. Beast form was not something that could be triggered at will. Rather, it required extensive accumulation. However, This battle with He Bing provided the opportunity he had been waiting for. His survival instincts, the resolve to defeat He Bing, and his bond and unity with Amber, the fusion of their blood aura, spiritual power, and Amber's innate mutant aura, all fulfilled Lu Ye's prerequisite conditions to enter beast form state. But Lu Ye's current transformation fell short of reaching Niu Meng's level. Unlike Niu Meng's change that saw him almost transfigured with real spirit beast features, Lu Ye's body was enveloped in an orange glow, with amber luminescent tiger ears and tail appearing as distinct features. This change left not only He Bing astounded, but also dumbfounded Li Baxian and Feng Yuechun. It had only been 20 days since Lu Yi had sold the Beast Pack technique to the Divine Trade Association, and up until now, no Beastmaster in Jiuzhou had ever achieved beast form yet. That was why He Bing, Li Baxian, and Feng Yuechun had never witnessed such a phenomenon before, and no one knew what was happening. But He Bing understood that the situation was spiraling out of his control. Whatever change was happening to Lu Yi, his already formidable aura was scaling up to unprecedented heights. In fact, he exuded an unbridled ferocity, his blood surging through every vein and artery with speed and intensity, and his spiritual power emanated like a blazing furnace, reminiscent of an ancient beast of boundless savageness broken free from its confines. Back in the cave, Yi was clutching the Nine Realms scroll firmly in her fingers, diligently maintaining its operation, when Lu Yi entered beast form. Ripples swept across the surface of the scroll like an earthquake, indicating an excessive strain within the spatial confines of the scroll's pocket dimension. It was not the scroll failing, but rather Yi wasn't supplying enough spiritual power to allow the scroll to operate at a capacity where it could sustain the sudden surge in power. Yi hastened to bolster the amount of spiritual power she was injecting into the scroll, and that finally stopped the trembling. In the meantime, feeling the unnatural winds billowing in the midst of the rock column sprawl in resonance with his burgeoning spiritual power, Lu Yi could feel a surrealistic sensation. A complete change in his perception of the world around him. Everything seemed to have slowed down around him, so much so that it afforded him a clear view of everything. The look of surprise and panic now flickering in He Bing's stare, the beads of blood trickling from Li Baxian's forehead, and the gradual formation of Feng Yuechun's sorcery. There wasn't any change in their speeds, it wasn't their movements that had slowed. But it was his movements that had accelerated, causing that unreal sensation. Without warning, He Bing lunged forward, his spear thrusting straight for Lu Yi with the intensity of a serpent while blasting Li Baxian aside before the latter could do anything. Even so, He Bing's instincts tingled wildly, warning him about some unknown, imminent danger. Lu Ye's growth in this battle had far outstripped his comprehension. What he initially thought was a secure victory since he had been playing safe had not turned out the way he expected. Instead of becoming weaker, Lu Yi had turned stronger. That prompted him to abandon his initial plan to defend and attack instead. Only this time, it was Li Baxian and Feng Yuechun that daunted him not one bit at all. The difference in their power and his was apparent enough. Rather, it was Lu Yi, who started out as the weakest combatant in this skirmish, that has now become the actual threat to him. Come on. Hack him. A voice resounded within the depths of Lu Ye's heart all of a sudden, one reminiscent of a babyish, fierce toddler, crying out at him as He Bing's spear tip drew near. Inviolable was halfway through deflecting away the incoming blow when Lu Yi heard the disembodied voice. Startled by the sudden sound, what strength he gathered wavered momentarily, diminishing its potency by a fraction. With a resounding clang, sparks flew and flames splashed in all directions as Lu Ye's figure hurtled backward. He Bing, fueled by his newfound momentum, unleashed a vicious flurry of blows, enveloping Lu Yi within its whirlwind, while at the same time, he was secretly relieved to find that Lu Ye's sudden spurt of power did not exceed his anticipation. He had overestimated Lu Yi, or so he believed. Strike after strike, Lu Yi retreated steadily. Inviolable was now an instrument of defense rather than of offense, parrying and sideswiping away desperately every attack He Bing was throwing at him. And with every stroke, the same disembodied, childlike voice squealed deep within his mind, ceaselessly chattering with a fierce and spirited tone like an incessantly annoying commentary. Left. Here comes the right side. Oh heavens, that was sloppy. Strike at him, not his spear. What's the point of hitting his weapon anyway? That's pathetic. Stab him in the stomach. In his chest. Gods, do you even know how to fight? Good chance, bite him in the neck. Go, go, go. Every time Lu Yi wanted to do anything, the voice would appear. If anything, it was more bothersome than helpful. Lu Yi was still baffled as to the origin of the voice, up until he heard it urging him to bite He Bing in the neck. That was when Lu Yi realized the source. Amber. What? So it really is you? Lu Yi mused deep inside. Astonished, Lu Yi marveled at the fact that he could clearly hear Amber's voice even in his beast form state. It wasn't Amber speaking directly, but a manifestation of their deep spiritual connection. Amber was able to transform into a cat at will, but it could not quite yet transfigure itself into humanoid form. It could not communicate in the human tongue, but it has all along been able to forge spiritual connections, and entering beast form had created a link between it and Lu Yi, allowing them both to communicate directly. For one moment, Lu Yi did not know how to react. After knowing the tiger for so long, he knew nothing about the tiger's behavior. Be quiet, he scowled at the tiger. All right. Amber yelped a reply and stayed silent after that, allowing Lu Yi to stay focused. Meanwhile, He Bing was wearing a smug grin. Still under the mistaken impression that Lu Yi must have relied on some incredible technique, he was thinking that whatever transformation Lu Yi might have undergone, it did not translate into the superiority He Bing feared and anticipated. The combat cultivator clearly was forced to remain on the defensive against his relentless onslaught. 10 blows. That was the limit of how long the young combat cultivator would last, he surmised, if the sword cultivator and the spell cultivator had not been constant nuisances. At least that was what he believed back then, until a sudden upstroke of the combat cultivator's saber carried such an indescribably ferocious burst of spiritual power that it bashed his spear off course. The strength of his opponent's blow shocked him. Seizing the opportunity, Lu Yi pressed forward, not giving his foe any time to react at all. But the latter was stunned. He did not see a human lunging at him with reckless abandon. All he saw was a ferocious predator swooping down on him like a tiger out for blood. Again and again, Lu Yi hurled endless blows at his foe, the ferocity of the assault so overwhelming that He Bing turned from surprised to terrified. The combat cultivator that he had regarded with indifference if not contempt had transformed into an entirely different person, exuding even greater strength than before. Sword and saber gnashed against spear while blood trickled and splattered, some from Lu Yi plus some from He Bing. Up until now, He Bing had received nothing more than just the scar that Li Baxin had left long ago when the fight was in its initial stage. Aside from that, He Bing had otherwise remained unscathed. But Lu Ye's present strength and power equaled that of a fifth order because of glyph, blood rage, making him quite close to He Bing's level of prowess. That, plus beast form, gave Lu Yi what he needed to surpass He Bing. What Lu Yi received from beast form was more than just an increase in strength, speed, and power. The influence of Amber's animalistic nature rubbed off most prominently, leading him to become unprecedentedly wild and violent. His assaults became attacks driven by an insatiable bloodlust that he became immune to any fear or sense of self-preservation. He Bing was finding himself overwhelmed by Lu Ye's relentless onslaught. Feng Yuechan and Li Baxin's eyes lit up at the astonishing shift in the battle. They quickly threw in what they could: spells, attacks, flying shafts, anything that they could put into play to support Lu Ye's advance. He Bing's situation grew increasingly dire. Realizing how the tables had been turned against him, He Bing frantically proposed a truce. Shall we call it a draw? There's no need to fight to the death. Never did He Bing expect, since the onset of this battle, that he would be the one proposing peace. What should have been easy pickings turned into him sailing perilously close to the winds. At this critical juncture, he could no longer underestimate Lu Yi and his companions. Lu Yi, however, remained silent. He could see no room for any negotiation, not after all the fighting until now. This gauntlet could only be solved with the death of either side, and He Bing still had the advantage, As soon as beast form and glyph, blood rage ran out, Lu Ye's strength and power would be back to the levels of the Third Order. If He Bing was still around, they would be left vulnerable. Furthermore, Lu Yi had no intention of revealing the secret of his teleportation ward. With Li Baxian and Feng Yuechan both identified, sparing him would only pose unnecessary risks. At any rate, He Bing's fate was sealed. He had to die. Chapter 520, Slaying He Bing. The dance of blades continued unabated within the clutter of the stone column sprawl. Lu Yi, in his beast form state, unleashed each slash with unprecedented speed and power. He Bing valiantly defended himself with his long spear, but the back of his hand was beginning to split open from the force of Lu Ye's relentless assault. His spiritual powers surged tempestuously, yet his situation was growing increasingly precarious. Amidst the chaos, Li Baxian and Feng Yuechan provided steadfast support from the sidelines, skillfully distracting He Bing's attention and creating openings for Lu Yi. It was in one such moment that Lu Ye's long saber honed in at He Bing's chest with the intensity of a serpent lunging at its prey. Fear and panic flickered in He Bing's eyes as he desperately leaned back, leaving himself perilously exposed. As much as he wished to deflect the imminent blow, there was no way his movements could make it in time. Lu Ye's current strength had soared to unprecedented heights, rendering He Bing's protective aura too weak to keep him safe against this attack. If struck, it would surely result in a fatal wound that could even mean his death. But just as death seemed inevitable, He Bing defiantly mustered an unexpected surge of spiritual power. A luminous triangular-shaped energy barrier materialized out of thin air, interposing itself before him and thwarting Inviolable's lethal advance. But the fear of death was real. He Bing was genuinely terrified. Anyone who saw his face could read that clearly. Surprise and curiosity etched across Lu Ye's countenance as he observed the intricate patterns adorning the impromptu defensive shield. He swiftly recognized what it was: glyph, protection. Was He Bing a glyph warlock too? If He Bing really was a glyph caster, then he should have used glyphs during the battle. But he didn't, and that only meant one thing. He Bing did not know glyph casting, but he must have glyphs tattooed on his body. Even for cultivators, tattooed glyphs remained a true rarity. Few possessed the knowledge and skills, plus the resources needed to cast tattooed glyphs. In fact, the physical constitution of most cultivators in the Cloud River realm could only allow them to carry only a single tattooed glyph, as any more would prove unbearable. He Bing's tattooed glyph must be on his chest, and the burst of spiritual power he just released must be what activated it. That was what saved his life just now. Therefore, Lu Yi was sure that being He Bing's hidden ace, the glyph must be something he would only use in the most desperate moment. But it was a very surrealistic sensation. Until now, Lu Yi had always been the one using glyph, protection, not the other way around. To see firsthand how his attack, a fatal blow that would have ended this skirmish, was thwarted by the same glyph was something new. Undeterred, Lu Yi prepared to press on and attack once more. Yet, even before he could act, Li Baxian, who had been providing auxiliary support, sprang into action. The scattered shafts of light that had been circling around him converged and melded into a single, formidable blade Li Baxian held aloft, his countenance solemn and his aura a steely cold presence. A frigid miasma of impending death swept across the site of the battle, and Li Baxian vanished, assuming the form of a gigantic sword of light himself, unsheathed and poised for slaughter. Ever since Lu Ye's beast form transformation, Li Baxian had relegated himself to a supporting role, never aiming to harm or kill the adversary. Instead, he sought only to distract and divert his attention. But now that He Bing had activated his final ace, Li Baxian evidently thought it was finally time for him to unleash his full might. The radiance of the sword shining with a resplendent illumination upon all reached even the eaves of the cavern as the sword of light struck at the luminescent shield like a thunderbolt in full wrath. The blinding light engulfed Li Baxian reappeared before He Bing the moment the gigantic sword of light made contact with He Bing's glyph, protection, its tip hovering unyieldingly at just a mere hair's breadth from the glyph. The cascading din of metal twisting followed before an eruption of power ensued. A thunderous boom reverberated through the air as the invincible glyph, protection, burst into pieces of energy dregs like fragile glass. Such was the terrible strength of sword cultivators. Despite being 3 tiers lower than He Bing in cultivation level, Li Baxian had managed to destroy the final bulwark that he relied upon for dear life. But that sapped Li Baxian of the entirety of his strength, leaving him open for He Bing to retaliate with a belligerent swing of his spear, viciously lashing aside the pallid, drained sword cultivator like a rag doll. Lu Yi sprang into action. Seizing this opportune moment that Li Baxian had created by putting his own life on the line, Lu Yi descended upon his adversary with inviolable ready for the kill. His special move, Flash. Terror surged in He Bing's eyes as he desperately sought to reactivate his glyph, protection using his spiritual power, but he was too slow, too late. The saber swept down in a deadly arc, and all He Bing saw was the phantom of a tiger materializing behind Lu Yi with a roar that echoed across the entire length and breadth of the cave. The frenetic chaos abruptly succumbed to stillness. Lu Yi maintained his frozen pose with his blade held before him as if time stood still in stasis, although blood dribbled down the sharp edges of inviolable in a steady stream. Trip. A faint sound shattered the newfound tranquility. Feng Yuechan pursed her ruby lips together, her gaze fixed upon He Bing and her spell warily poised for release. 3 yards away from Lu Yi, He Bing stood there, petrified with his spear still thrust forward. The glyph, protection he activated quietly dissipated away, vanishing into the air like dust. His eyes twitched as he glanced at the figure who had just attacked him, his visage contorted with disbelief and unwillingness. Next second, He Bing fell backward, landing flat on his back as the impact separated his severed head and his torso, his gaze wide-eyed and unblinking with lingering unwillingness and disbelief. Phew! It was only at that moment that Feng Yuechan finally exhaled, retracting her spiritual power. Hastily, she rushed towards Li Baxian with distress and concern etched upon her features as she assessed his condition. Meanwhile, Lu Yi sank to the ground, limbs sprawled haphazardly, his gaze fixated upon the expanse above shifting magically. His vision blurred momentarily, and he found himself once again within the confines of the underground cavern. The battle had concluded and they had triumphed. Lu Yi, are you all right? Yi cautiously approached, her gaze filled with trepidation as she observed Lu Yi, who looked like he had just been dunked face-first into a vat of blood. Her voice trembled, tinged with the threat of tears. I'm all right. What about Brother Baxian? Li Baxian weakly croaked in response, right here. I'm fine. Li Baxian, though in better condition, still showed signs of exhaustion after unleashing his secret sword technique. The final blow had drained him entirely. Lu Yi was relieved to hear that everyone had survived. Just as the tension eased, a sudden eruption of crimson stained the air, revealing the figure of Amber. Yet, the creature appeared disheveled, indicating the toll that beast form had taken on it. In that fleeting moment of vulnerability, an overwhelming surge of fatigue and exhaustion overtook Lu Yi, his every ounce of energy and spirit utterly spent. This weariness wasn't solely the consequence of beast form but also the drawback of glyph, blood rage plus the injuries He Bing had left on him, all of which proved to be an unbearable burden. Struggling to speak, Lu Yi managed only a single sentence, I need rest. And with that, his consciousness succumbed to darkness. Startled, Yi hurriedly checked Lu Ye's condition, relieved to find him stable. Li Baxian, too, descended into a deep slumber, while Amber curled protectively by Lu Ye's side. The job of making sure that the men could rest in peace now fell on Feng Yuechan and Yi's shoulders. Yi carefully tended to Lu Ye's wounds and administered healing pills before she spoke. Senior Sister Feng, I'll leave them to you. I will be outside, keeping watch for anything. Feng Yuechan nodded her agreement. With Lu Yi and Li Baxian now unconscious after the vicious and gritting fight, they would all be dead meat if anyone were to intrude into this cave and keep them all pinned inside. Yi's ability to move freely underground made her the perfect candidate to stand guard outside and monitor for any unwanted visitors. After all, Lu Yi had always relied on her to scout around and reconnoiter unknown areas for enemies. Meanwhile, the sudden surge in carnage points behind Lu Ye's name had sparked intrigue among many who had been keeping tabs on the developments on the carnage roster. His increments had always been in the hundreds lately, especially for the huge increase when he slew the enemy Sixth Order, and that had piqued the attention of certain quarters who had begun observing him. It did not take long for others to conclude that he must be a low-tiered Cloud River realm cultivator. There were only so many reasons behind his frequently large increments, and the most commonly known way was slaying enemies beyond one's cultivation rank. With a 250-point surge, more people stopped to wonder who was unlucky enough to be his prey. It was worth noting that killing a Ninth Order would only result in a 60-point reward, and yet Lu Ye's reward was more than 4 times that amount. 500 miles away was a disgruntled Wei Ke who was scowling at the carnage roster with palpable frustration. He was aware that Lu Ye's cultivation level stood nowhere higher than the Third Order. A 250-point escalation undoubtedly signified that Lu Ye had slain an enemy Seventh Order. The notion of a Third Order successfully slaying a Seventh Order bordered on the unimaginable. Even with the assistance of Li Baxian and Feng Yuechan, it strained credulity. And yet, the evidence lay glaringly before Wei Ke's eyes. But what irritated him wasn't Lu Ye's gain of carnage points. He could care less about Lu Ye's performance in this carnage coliseum, especially since he did not have any intention of climbing the rankings at all. His objective had been Lu Ye all along. And because of that, he was certain that he was heading the wrong way. A battle with an enemy Seventh Order as their adversary would have caused quite a commotion. Yet he had traveled so far and found no signs of them. Where were they? How did they manage to evade his detection? Wei Ke found himself utterly confused. As time slipped away, the rankings on the carnage roster experienced more change, with the gaps between the 2nd and 10th positions becoming smaller and smaller to the extent that a single battle could propel one's position upward by several places. But what intrigued and gladdened those trying to climb the carnage roster was how Lu Ye's carnage points had gone stagnant. Lu Ye's points had remained static for extended periods before, but they had typically increased by several hundred points almost daily afterward. Yet now, Lu Ye's tally had plateaued at 3,990 and had remained there for quite some time without any increments. His former lead of more than 1,000 points had been so commanding that many had felt catching up to him was more impossible than daunting. But his present inactivity ignited renewed determination among the rest of the Carnage Coliseum contestants, compelling them to intensify their hunt for enemies to rake in more carnage points. 3 more days passed by and the second-ranked Tan Sheng finally succeeded in usurping Lu Ye's spot at the top of the carnage roster. Ecstatic at his achievement, Tan Sheng couldn't help but wonder if Lu Ye had already met his demise. Yet, the persistent presence of Lu Ye's name on the board indicated otherwise. That would mean that Lu Ye must be hurt or recovering from a fierce battle. His guess was right. Lu Ye was indeed busy recuperating. While his injuries weren't overly severe, his body needed respite. A day or 2 of rest would typically be enough for him to recover from the strains of the gritting battle against Ti Bing, but the compounded drawbacks of using beast form and glyph, blood rage, was what enveloped him in a perpetual state of weakness. Recalling a similar weakness he experienced when he once used glyph, Fire Phoenix, back when he was still in the Spirit Creek battlefield, Lu Ye lamented how Hua Ci was present then. Her tender care had facilitated swift recovery on that occasion. Chapter 521, The Golden Body Token. After 3 days of much-needed rest, Lu Ye's strength was replenished and Li Baxian regained his vigor. With almost 10 days elapsing, there was no telling when this time's Carnage Coliseum would end. In general, Carnage Coliseums typically remained open for a period of 2 to 4 weeks. However, there had been no record of any precise pattern of how long this enclosed dimension stayed open. No one knew exactly how long Carnage Coliseums lasted, and at the conclusion of each Carnage Coliseum, the enigmatic entity known as the Heavens would begin the distribution of spoils based on one's position on the Carnage roster. Once enjoying an impressive lead in the Carnage roster rankings, Lu Ye's position had now slipped to 4th place. It was not entirely unexpected. The rest of the elites that dominated the roster had been relentlessly killing and maiming just so that they could overtake him during his recuperation period. But Lu Yi was not one to accept defeat easily. If it were before he joined up with Li Baxin and Feng Yuechan, he would have cared less about his placing on the roster. But after all the hard work to claim the first spot, he was not willing to throw in the towel and watch all that effort go to waste. With his health restored, a fierce determination brewed to reclaim the coveted first place within him. Yet, before he could try clambering his way back to the first spot, he had to attend to some preparations, foremost among them setting up the crucial teleportation wards. The teleportation ward at the cave where they were taking refuge failed to link him to any other wards. If an enemy were to step into this cave, Lu Yi and his companions would be trapped inside. In spite of all that, Lu Yi felt nothing but a mix of exasperation and frustration. He had taken extra care to construct his teleportation wards in obscure corners of the Colosseum grounds, either in the deep recesses of some underground burrows or the depths of subterranean caves. Yet, he was acutely aware that if he, with all his resourcefulness, could discover these hidden spots, there was a chance, however slim, that others might stumble upon them as well. Any other cultivator might venture into one of these many caves or burrows and trigger the explosive wards, obliterating everything he had so meticulously crafted. Therefore, the more teleportation wards he could construct the better, so that he would still have others to rely on as insurance. Lu Yi got ready before he slipped out of the cave alone. What should have been a clear blue sky outside was a morbid red sheen blotting out the sunlight. The force field of the Carnage Colosseum phenomena had effectively cast across the entire length and breadth of its grounds a macabre feel of hopelessness. Li Baxin and Feng Yuechan did not come with him. They were still in the cave. The perilous task of constructing the wards demanded extreme caution and stealth, making it a mission Lu Yi best undertook alone. More so, since Lu Yi had the means to render himself invisible even if he were to encounter any 8th or 9th orders, while Li Baxin and Feng Yuechan could barely boast of any technique of the kind. Lu Yi traveled for almost 200 miles. His memory led him to a cave he once found before. This was the same spot where he had constructed one of his teleportation wards before. But the inside of the cave was filled with debris and the place bore the hallmarks of a huge explosion resulting from a surge of spiritual power before. Someone must have been hurt when the explosive ward went off, meaning that the one who had triggered the ward had to be a low-tiered Cloud River realm cultivator. Most 8th or 9th orders would have been able to walk away from such an explosion unscathed. Lu Yi examined the structural integrity of the cave, concluding finally that it was still strong enough before he cleared the place of all the debris and began reconstructing the wards. Someone might have come here before, but Lu Yi was confident that whoever it was, he or she had found nothing except for a huge explosion that must have been an awfully terrible surprise. To that end, he was sure that the intruder would not come back here. The work took a little more than an hour, then Lu Yi tried testing the teleportation ward. It worked fine, linking not only to the one in the cave Li Baxin and Feng Yuechan, but to another ward that was apparently still functioning as well. Back when he first constructed his first set of teleportation wards, there were 12. But after everything that had happened, he did not know how many of the wards were still working. That was because the wards were linked to one another like a chain instead of a widely connected network. That allowed him to only sense the existence of other teleportation wards through immediate pairings and not others. With his work done here, Lu Yi got out of the cave and rendered himself invisible again before he traveled for another 200 miles. With Yi's help, he found another suitable spot where he constructed another teleportation ward. This time, this ward was created so that it could link to the one he had just built and the one that was in the cave where Li Baxin was still at. This would allow him to have two options to choose in the event of a quick retreat. Even if one of them were destroyed, he would still have one more to rely on. After he bing, Lu Yi knew better than to be careless again. The last thing he wanted was another fight with an opponent as powerful as a 7th order. They might have triumphed against He Bing in the end, but not without a huge risk and cost. They had nearly lost their own lives during the course of defeating He Bing, and the toll of the battle had taken them 3 days to recover, which was devastating enough for all the work that they had put in to maintain Lu Ye's first position on the Carnage roster. Defeating enemies of the 4th or 5th order was more efficient, way less risky, and definitely more rewarding. Lu Yi constructed 2 more teleportation wards before he finally contacted Li Baxian to make sure that he was still safe. He stood on his freshly built ward and vanished. Reappearing back at the cave where Li Baxian and Feng Yuechan were still sheltered, he regrouped with them and together, they slipped out of the cave. Under the ominous claret sky hanging overhead, Lu Yi and his companions continued their cautious journey for more than 10 miles before Lu Yi stopped to construct some wards to mask his companions' spiritual power signatures. Next, he selected another suitable spot and built a trap ward there as a precautionary measure in case of meeting powerful enemies. When that was done, Lu Yi hid himself and waited for any unsuspecting prey. As time passed with the painstaking pace of a glacier, Lu Yi decided on a brief moment of respite by glancing up at the Carnage roster to check his place. There he saw his position slipping to 7th place, which would only award him 3 gold amulets, a far cry from the rewards of the first prize. In the meantime, enthroned upon the highly coveted first place was Tan Sheng, who, by some unknown luck, had built an impressive lead of 300 points, leaving others struggling to catch up. It was Lu Ye's 3-day dormancy that had given the runners-up any semblance of hope to keep catching up in spite of his initial lead of more than 1,000 points. 6 hours breezed by uneventfully until a group of cultivators soared nearby, their cautious demeanor indicating their relatively modest cultivation levels. That they were maintaining a low altitude, barely 30 meters above ground level, despite using magical conveyance that would have allowed them to fly higher and faster confirmed as much. Clearly, they wanted to be able to hit the ground fast so that they could hide themselves immediately in the event of encountering strong adversaries. Li Baxian seized the initiative, first to ascertain their allegiances and gauge their power before Feng Yuechan launched any of her potent magical attacks. Lu Yi would be biding his time just like before, waiting for the opportune moment to strike. The group turned out to be enemy cultivators, and the concerted efforts of Lu Yi and his companions took no longer than 30 seconds to make short work of them. The trio efficiently cleaned up the site of the battle, leaving no trace of their presence before retreating with their hard-earned spoils and Lu Yi with his ward flags and keystones, ready for another ambush. Despite the seamless progression of their battles, maintaining unwavering vigilance remained imperative. One could never predict when trouble might come visiting in the Carnage Colosseum, an enemy 8th or 9th order for instance. To that end, the trio staunchly adhered to their steadfast principle of not laying ambushes in the same location twice. Upon their return to the subterranean cavern, Lu Yi began undoing the magical seals of the looted storage bags. They divided the spoils amongst themselves before they traveled to another spot using Lu Ye's teleportation ward. After a brief interlude for recuperation, they made ready to resume raiding. True to form, each passing day saw Lu Yi amassing hundreds of Carnage points, steadily accumulating until the 13th day of the Colosseum when his total tally reached an impressive 5,440 points. His ranking ascended, settling him comfortably in the 6th position. Yet, despite this commendable pace, it became apparent that regaining the top spot of the Carnage roster had become an unattainable aspiration. The gap that separated him from the current frontrunner Tan Sheng was now a chasm too vast for him to traverse. As an elite 9th order, Tan Sheng could venture everywhere freely without having to worry that he might be attacked. No one in their right mind would do such a thing. So long as he avoided encounters with any elite Grand Sky Coalition 9th orders, Tan Sheng had nothing to fear. In stark contrast, Lu Yi and his comrades had to navigate their every move with the utmost caution, wary of leaving even the faintest trace that might attract the attention of any fearsome enemies. Yet, such predicaments were unavoidable, for their own cultivation levels were just undeniably and dishearteningly too low. A profound weakness that had plagued them relentlessly since the moment they stepped into the Cloud River battlefield. Nevertheless, the rewards for securing the 6th position on the Carnage roster were far from modest. Despite being just one step above the 7th place, the winner of the 6th position would be awarded a bountiful sum of 5 gold amulets. Within the sanctuary of their concealed mountain cave, Lu Yi was sitting right on top of his teleportation ward. He had finished undoing the magical seals on the storage bags and divided them into 3 equal portions. Everyone took their own share. Such a methodical allocation of spoils had become customary for cultivators, making the contents of each individual's storage bags contingent upon the capricious whims of fortune. Regrettably, the majority of findings proved unremarkable, a motley collection of inconspicuous trinkets. Some of the bags contained amulets, but their qualities were hardly anything worth celebrating. These amulets were undoubtedly loot foraged from endowment events that occurred all around the Colosseum grounds. What a pity that these amulets were gathered only to fall into the hands of Lu Yi and his companions, inadvertently saving them a huge hassle. One after another, the trio emptied the storage bags of their contents before they sorted the loot and classified everything. From his last storage bag, Lu Yi fished out something odd-looking, an authority token the size of his palm. Engraved upon its surface was an intricate emblem reminiscent of a bell, its depiction accentuated by a few subtle strokes suggestive of luminous emanations at the flank, its appearance oddly whimsical, almost inducing a smile from anyone who gazed upon it. Lu Yi had never seen something like that before and thought that it was just a token bearing an insignia belonging to a sect or an order the slain cultivators belonged to. Nonchalantly poised to cast it aside, his hand froze mid-air when Li Baxian unexpectedly interjected. "Hold it, brother. Let me have a look at that," Li Baxian requested, his eyes trained upon Lu Yi. Curiosity piqued, Lu Yi complied, handing the token to Li Baxian. Taking hold of it, Li Baxian examined the object from every angle, even going so far as to give it a gentle squeeze before passing it, still with an air of uncertainty, to Feng Yuechan. "Take a look at this," he urged her. Feng Yuechan studied the object intently, a flicker of recognition igniting her countenance as she muttered, her expression a mix of astonishment and skepticism. "Could it be?" "What do you think?" Li Baxian inquired. "It certainly seems so. I recall coming across similar markings and dimensions in an ancient tome. What a surprise that this too manifested within the Carnage Colosseum. Someone was lucky enough to have stumbled upon it." "Indeed. I wonder who was lucky to have found this." "Not lucky enough, I'd say. Whoever owned this, he or she is dead now." The exchange between the two unexpectedly roused Lu Ye's inquisitiveness. Once their conversation had concluded, Lu Yi finally interjected, "What is this token for, Brother Baxian?" Based on Li Baxian and Feng Yuechan's intonation, it clearly seemed that the object held significance far beyond that of a mere identification token, something so enigmatic that he did not know what it could do at all. "Why, this is a treasure indeed," Li Baxian declared, returning the token to Lu Yi. "This, brother, is none other than the infamous Golden Body Token." "Golden Body Token?" "Yes, brother. You are familiar with Golden Body Talismans, I gather?" The Golden Body Token shares similarities with those talismans in that both provide comprehensive protection. However, while the efficacy of a Golden Body Talisman depends on the quality of the magical talisman itself, this Golden Body Token is a celestial bestowment by the heavens themselves. In other words, once activated, it possesses an unbreakable aura bestowed by the heavens, rendering anyone cloaked by this aura indestructible and unkillable. Furthermore, its duration of effect far exceeds that of a Golden Body Talisman. It can persist for several hours at the very least. Chapter 522, Yet Another Gold Amulet, the Special One. An aura of protection bestowed by the heavens that lasts for hours? Lu Yi could barely comprehend the words he uttered with shock. That's the gist of it. As for how long the aura lasts, I'm not sure myself. I've only heard of the token. This is the first time I'm seeing it up close. It's something that's gifted by the heavens and that makes it extremely rare, added Feng Yuechan. I've heard of people finding golden body tokens during their forays into other mystic realms and dimensions, but I've never heard of it being seen in the Carnage Colosseum before. But it should be expected. Endowment events are after all instances where heaven sprinkles gifts and trinkets around. To think that the cultivators we slew were lucky enough to have stumbled on this token, just not lucky enough to survive long enough to even use it. That reminded Lu Yi about one particular detail he had overlooked. During the ambush earlier, one of the 1,000 Demon Ridge cultivators had been rummaging through his storage bag frantically as if he was looking for something. But before he found whatever it was he was finding, he was already cut down by Lu Yi, who had appeared out of nowhere. The poor fellow must have been digging so desperately for his golden body token, Lu Yi realized. What else could he be searching for if not for something that would deliver him from harm during that perilous moment? This is a very rare and useful item, brother. Keep it well, this could save you when all else fails, urged Li Baxin. As a once-in-lifetime gift from heaven, this golden body token represented one of the best protection one could ever enjoy. There were few methods that could defeat a divine bulwark as potent as this. The past few days of grueling and life-threatening tribulations, a close shave with an enemy Ninth Order and that vicious battle against Yibing, had Li Baxin wondering if luck had finally stopped favoring Lu Yi. But now he knew that his doubts were misplaced. Lucky was still very much Lu Ye's middle name, and gaining possession of this golden body token was proof of that. So how do I use this thing? Asked Lu Yi. Just inject your spiritual power into it, explained Li Baxin. That's simple enough, a bemused Lu Yi thought as he tucked the token into safekeeping. He could never have enough instruments like this token that could ensure his survival. Instruments whose purposes were more useful and more crucial to him than any weapons or other magical apparatuses, for all humans only live once. Lu Yi and his companions put aside the rest of their loot. It was time for their next ambush. 2 days later, Lu Yi was invisible as he waited patiently for his next targets to appear. His luck had begun to look up markedly since finding the golden body token. For the past 2 days, the raids he and his companions had conducted saw his carnage points tally skyrocketing so rapidly. So much so that Lu Yi had reached 3rd place, just a mere 500 points behind the first place Tan Xing. It would take just another few more days for him to overtake Tan Xing and regain his lead. But the optimistic thought was conceived on the premise that Lu Yi still had time. Almost a fortnight had passed since this Carnage Coliseum began, and no one knew for sure if it would end before Lu Yi could knock Tan Xing off his perch. More than 6 hours had come and gone. A coterie of cultivators had passed by just now, but the ambush had to be called off prematurely when Li Baxin realized that they were Grand Sky Coalition allies when he sprung his trap. Just when they were grappling with boredom and restlessness, a powerful surge of spiritual power came sweeping at their positions. Lu Yi looked in the direction from whence it came. There, several miles away, he could see a bright radiant column of light reaching straight up into the skies, lancing through the clouds overhead. That's the Lu Yi mused with a mix of recognition and amazement. That's the eruption of spiritual power of that special gold amulet. After witnessing the same eruption 4 times the last time he was chosen to be the unlucky bearer of the unique gold amulet, Lu Yi immediately recognized the phenomena for what it was. But this was his first time seeing it from a distance, and the spectacle really was impressive, if not conspicuous enough. Every day, a cultivator within the Carnage Coliseum was selected to be the bearer of the unique once-a-day gold amulet. But given the sheer expanse of the Coliseum's area, plus the fact that Lu Yi and his companions kept their activities to a tiny range for the sake of security, it was normal to think that Lu Yi had never witnessed the spectacle before until today. Lu Yi was stirred by the notion of the rewards of being in possession of that unique gold amulet before he dismissed any ambitions of it. It would be foolhardy to head for the gold amulet. The eruption of spiritual power and the ensuing column of light speared right up into the clouds was a gigantic beacon beckoning literally every cultivator, both strong and weak, to come this way, making the notion of going near it nothing but a surefire attempt at suicide. If a 7th Order like Yibing could nearly annihilate them all, then an enemy beyond that level would be more difficult if not impossible to defeat. The golden body token could only keep one individual safe, not 2 or 3. In fact, anticipating chaos and carnage, Lu Yi would rather leave this place as quickly as his legs could carry him. By his reckoning, the point where the white spear of light was jutting skyward was but a mere handful of miles away from his position. Any Cloud River Realm cultivator could scale that distance in a matter of seconds. Hence the safer course of action was to walk away instead of running headlong into certain peril. But the thought of fleeing had merely struck him when the silhouette of a lone stranger flitted into view. Looking anxious and distressed, the stranger never stopped looking back as if he was fleeing from pursuers. Gliding at almost 20-odd meters and hugging the treeline, Lu Yi surmised that he must be a sixth order. Cursing and muttering something incomprehensible under his breath, the stranger appeared visibly tense and agitated. An idea occurred to Lu Yi, yet Li Baxian broke cover before he could convey to him what he had in mind, brandishing a flying shaft of light as he lunged at the sixth order with astonishing speed. Already on tenterhooks at first, being ambushed all of a sudden nearly sent the stranger into fits of panic as he frantically summoned whatever faculties he had at his disposal to put up as good a defense as he could. As they clashed, the backs of their hands emitted luminous glows of 2 different colors. The stranger immediately guessed Li Baxian's cultivation rank and glowered, "How dare you? A lowly fourth order like you?" He thrust a finger at Li Baxian and several projectiles, flying weapons, rose into the air and swarmed after the latter, who immediately summoned his own shafts of light to intercept, eliciting a cacophonous clamor of cascading metallic clangs. Then Feng Yuechan came out of hiding to fire a spell from his flank, catching the lone sixth order by surprise that he needed to defend himself in a pathetic and ignoble state of desperation. The sixth and seventh order of the Cloud River realm might have sounded close, but the gap in strength was by no means small. At any rate, the lone sixth order could barely come close to boasting the same degree of talents and fundamentals as He Bing, who had, unlike the stranger, had ascended into the Cloud River realm with all 360 spiritual points unlocked. All this stranger managed at the time was 298. That made him a very weak sixth order. So weak that Li Baxian and Feng Yuechan alone were enough to give him a hard time. In fact, even Li Baxian alone could have defeated him. It did not take long for the enemy sixth order to realize that he was not dueling a pair of fourth orders of mediocre strength. His face squirmed from the growing fear and trepidation as he bemoaned his poor luck. He was trying to put as much distance between him and the site of the huge spiritual power eruption when he walked right into this ambush that had clearly been here for a long time. Clearly not one set specifically for him, he realized that it was he who stepped into the trap like a hare getting caught in a hunter's snare. But he would have gladly given away the item that the heavens had just bestowed upon him to bargain for his precious life, if only he could. He had tried tossing it away, but it stayed on him like a tumor. One that brought both despair and desolation in equal measures. He had tried looking for help too. He had been reaching out to some of the 1,000 Demon Ridge elites, but none of them were willing to help. With the conclusion of the Colosseum now in the offing, the elites were all busy raking in as many Carnage points as possible, all so that they could secure a better position on the Carnage roster. No one heeded his call for aid. He blamed luck for visiting this fate upon him, of all people. What was already a dire situation for the lone sixth order took a turn for the worse as if in response to his dismal and cynical outlook. His tingling senses warned him of danger coming from his back. But it was too late. A stab of pain coursed through every limb and he hurtled forward, crashing to the ground like a beaten dog. Lu Yi appeared at where the sixth order was standing with inviolable bristling with a fiery light. Drawing first blood enlivened Lu Yi enough to charge without fear. He lunged at his target with Li Baxian and Feng Yuechan holding up the rear with their flying shafts and spells poised to outflank the enemy. The lone sixth order scrambled to his feet, using his weapon to parry whatever bolts of light that pelted incessantly at him, but he missed one spell that hit him, blasting him off his feet. That gave Lu Yi the opening he needed. He dove forward and inviolable sank its edge through the defenseless man. Blood spattered before the body even hit the ground. That's strange, Lu Yi mused. A sixth order that's surprisingly weak. The trio had collected plenty of experience in dealing with sixth orders in their many raids and ambushes on unsuspecting parties of enemy cultivators, yet they had never seen a sixth order as weak as this one. This stranger's fundamentals must be very limited, and his attempts at unlocking his spiritual points before his ascension into this realm must have been lackluster at best. Lu Yi and his comrades hurriedly set about gathering the spoils, swiftly stowing away the stranger's belongings and items. In a daring move, Lu Yi extended his hand into the dead man's robes, and as anticipated, he discovered a glistening gold amulet enveloped in a subtle cerulean glow. "Let's go," barked Lu Yi, his voice resonating with urgency. Li Baxian and Feng Yuechan hurriedly followed suit, leaving behind the strewn ward flags and flagstones without a moment's hesitation. They had scarcely traveled 100 yards when a streak of light darted straight for them, materializing into a figure right before their eyes. Evidently, it was another cultivator, one that had detected the tumultuous clash and had decided to come this way to investigate. Lu Yi and his companions tensed, their bodies braced for an imminent confrontation with an unknown adversary. Thankfully, the battlefield imprints on the back of their hands remained dormant. The new stranger was an ally of the Grand Sky Coalition. He sensed the cultivation ranks of Lu Yi and his party, and snorted, signaling them to leave this place with haste. With a respectful bow, Lu Yi and his comrades swiftly retreated. Moments later, the echoes of a fierce skirmish reverberated from behind them. It seemed the formidable ally cultivator had crossed paths with Thousand Demon Ridge cultivators. The upheaval created by such a clash would undoubtedly capture the attention of more cultivators, drawing more dangers away from Lu Ye's position. Lu Yi and his companions darted into the shelter of a mountain cave. He activated a magical ward to conceal the signatures of their spiritual power and waited. At the first sign of trouble, he would activate the teleportation ward to shift them to another ward. Fortune seemed to favor them this time. Aside from the Grand Sky Coalition ally earlier, they encountered no one else. They were safe and no one had discovered them for now. With no one finding this cave, there was no need for them to teleport away just yet. But the din of battle never stopped resounding in the distance. Cultivators from both factions must have converged upon the location of the spiritual power surge just now, and that must have culminated into a huge battle. No one knew whose hands the unique gold amulet fell into. With its whereabouts now a temporary mystery, Lu Yi and his companions were safe. It was their luck when it was the bearer of the gold amulet himself who had walked right into their carefully laid ambush. And with him now dead, the gold amulet was lost. The first 2 hours passed, then another 2 hours. The tumult outside was gradually subsiding and Lu Yi and his party finally breathed more easily. In their respite, the trio turned their minds towards the spoils of their raid. Several storage bags lay before them, each yielding a disappointingly meager loot. However, one item shone above all, the heaven-sent gold amulet that was shining radiantly, its gentle azure luminescence an unmistakable emblem of its extraordinary nature. Lu Yi couldn't have fathomed that luck would once again grant him the opportunity to possess a gold amulet, the special and impossibly dangerous one. But given his past experiences, he now had more confidence in safeguarding this invaluable token. With a measure of good fortune on his side, he would succeed in holding on to it while staying alive. To most other cultivators, this unique gold amulet was more of a curse than a boon. It could not be used until the designated time period had elapsed, nor could it be stored away or even discarded, a ticking time bomb that could never be removed. Chapter 523, Salvation of the Jiang Brothers. Back when Lu Yi was chosen to be the bearer of his first unique gold amulet, he had tried almost everything, like throwing it away and using his teleportation ward to travel as far as possible from it. Nothing worked. The unique gold amulet remained physically inseparable like a tumor that obstinately refused to break away. It was more of a curse than a boon. Unless its bearer was killed, the gold amulet would forever follow him or her literally everywhere. Hence, being chosen to be the bearer of unique gold amulets was tantamount to being given a death sentence, especially for low-tier cultivators. Lu Yi had no intention of getting himself latched to another unique gold amulet and enduring its torments for another time. But by some ironic stroke of luck, this particular amulet had just dropped on his lap and there was nothing else he could do save to make the most of it. But not all was doom and gloom. If Lu Yi could repeat his earlier feat, then this encore could not only earn him an extra gold amulet but also enough carnage points to launch him back to the top spot on the roster. And that could be achieved with the help of his teleportation wards, so long as he had enough of them. There was only one glaring issue. Lu Yi had witnessed one spiritual power eruption from the amulet, but he did not know how many spiritual power eruptions he would still have to go through. There was no way of telling how many eruptions had occurred before. 6 hours breezed by swiftly. The gold amulet now cradled in Lu Ye's arms emitted the next pulse of spiritual power surge. The tremendous wave of energy swept across the terrain as a column of light tunneled up into the clouds overhead. There was time to go. Without any hesitation, he activated the teleportation ward. But before they vanished from the cave, Lu Yi did not neglect to fire a spiritual power blast at the explosive ward not far away. Flames filled the entire length and breadth of the cave while a deafening thunderclap reverberated through the cavern. Lu Yi and his companions were gone, along with any traces of them being there before. Before too long, the place was swarming with cultivators investigating the energy pulse. But the mess and debris were all they could find. Meanwhile, Lu Yi and the others were just reappearing in the teleportation ward more than 200 miles away. The first thing he did was reconnoiter the area for any enemies. A message came from her soon enough. The coast was clear. They were safe. The trio waited there patiently. Another 6 hours elapsed. It was time for the next signal by the unique gold amulet, the next eruption of spiritual power and the column of light. Just like before, they triggered the explosive wards before using the teleportation ward, setting off another huge explosion. Lu Yi and his companions arrived at their destination, and the first thing he did was to scout around the area for any potential threats. In the meantime, Lu Yi tested his teleportation ward and made sure that it could still link with other nearby wards. To his dismay, there was only one still working. The unique gold amulet had already triggered twice. Plus the time when it was still in the possession of its former bearer, that would mean that the amulet had released its eruption thrice. Yet the soft emerald-like luminescence remained as radiant as ever, indicating that its duration had not yet ended. There would be another blast of light and spiritual power. The last one. The situation was by no means comforting. Without more than one option of exfiltration meant insecurity and greater risk. Anything could happen. The last functioning transportation ward might be discovered by someone else, triggering the explosive wards that would destroy it. If that were to really happen, then Lu Yi and his companions would be trapped. Realizing their fix, Lu Yi knew that he needed to venture out to construct more transportation wards. He spoke to Li Baxin about his plan, then he made himself invisible and slipped out of the cavern. He randomly chose a bearing and headed that way. There was little Li Baxin and the others could do to help. They could not render themselves invisible, so it would be best for him to go out alone while the others waited for him. 200 miles was not too far for Lu Yi to cover alone, but to remain undetected he would have to be extremely cautious, and that slowed him down a lot. That, plus searching for a suitable spot to build his new transportation ward, took him more than 2 hours before he could begin the actual work of constructing the ward. There was no time for another, so he turned around and headed back. He needed to regroup with the others. Back at the cave, Lu Yi waited patiently as the time finally came, the last eruption of that unique gold amulet. The pillar of light rose up in the blink of an eye, followed swiftly by a rolling tsunami of spiritual power while Lu Yi and his companions made their swift exit, vanishing from the transportation ward. A split second later, they reappeared at the new transportation ward Lu Yi constructed not long ago. After ensuring that all was safe around them, Lu Yi quickly extracted the unique gold amulet. The faint azure glow was gone. He finally breathed a sigh of relief before stowing it away in his storage sphere. At the same time, Lu Ye's name on the Carnage roster soared up 2 positions, reclaiming his spot at the top of the list. His tally of Carnage points had skyrocketed by an astonishing 750 points, surpassing the 7,000th mark with a 200-point lead over second-ranking Tan Sheng. Somewhere else, Tan Sheng, dressed in a flowing green robe, lifted his head to observe the changes on the Carnage roster, his brows furrowing in consternation. He couldn't help but marvel at Lu Ye's incredible luck. Such a significant increase in bounty points must have been due to the possession of that unique gold amulet. And this wasn't the first time either. The last time Lu Yi had gained such a substantial spurt of carnage points in one go, it catapulted him to the top of the carnage roster too. In just a half month, Lu Yi had acquired 2 unique gold amulets, displaying an extraordinary fortune that anyone would salivate with extreme jealousy. Tan Sheng had heard the stories about Lu Yi, about how he was a member of the Crimson Blood sect of Bingzhou province and how he carried a huge price on his head from the numerous bounties offered by various sects and orders of the Thousand Demon Ridge Coalition. Many had been scouring the Carnage Coliseum grounds for him lately, but to no avail. He had managed to avoid detection the whole time. The 200 Carnage point difference wasn't an impossible task for Tan Sheng, but he knew that catching up to Lu Yi wouldn't be easy. Lu Ye's cultivation rank might be low, yet it had contributed to his remarkable efficiency in gathering carnage points that far outstripped Tan Sheng's to the extent of perplexity. Having been overtaken, Tan Sheng knew that he had to find other ways of amassing more carnage points. The rewards for becoming the champion of the carnage roster and those of the first runner-up differed significantly, the difference being a Primus-level wisp of sanctification. On the cusp of achieving the true Lake Realm, 9th Order Tan Sheng might have little need for the wisp of sanctification at the onset of his imminent departure from the Cloud River battlefield. But he wanted it nonetheless, for the good of the juniors in his order if not for his own sake. As Tan Sheng contemplated his plans, he received a message. He checked his battlefield imprint. It was sent to him by one of the juniors in his order. The message was brief. Someone had gone to great lengths to contact him through his juniors. All they wanted was to meet him somewhere in the Colosseum. But Tan Sheng was more inclined to go on gathering as many carnage points as possible to overtake Lu Yi. Time was of the essence, and he wasn't interested in spending any of his valuable minutes meeting some strangers, especially strangers who were clearly weaklings since they had to go through layers of channels just to reach him. He was about to flatly refuse the request to meet when the next missive he received made his eyes twinkle with intrigue. He replied swiftly, "Are you sure about this? That's what they said?" His junior's response came soon enough. "Yes, that's what they said, but we don't know whether it's true or not. If they truly possess that item, then what they say could very well be possible. Get me their location." An approximate location of the strangers came soon enough. Tan Sheng referred to his map. The meeting spot was quite a distance away from his current position. Even with his level of cultivation, it would take considerable effort and time to reach it. Nonetheless, there was no hesitation from him. "Tell them to wait there, I'm on my way." Concluding the communication, Tan Sheng took to the sky, turning into a streak of light that zoomed in the direction of the agreed meeting point. In the meantime, perched atop the summit of a mountain were a pair of well-hidden figures. If Lu Yi were here, he would recognize the brothers Jiang Liuzi and Jiang Qingzi. Yet both of them presently appeared disheveled and battered, sporting injuries from their recent battles. Both proficient Fifth Orders in their own right, the brothers, like Lu Yi, were capable of defeating opponents beyond their ranks. For some time now, they had been led by an allied cultivator named Lu Shu, diligently searching the Colosseum for various opportunities and endowments as they sought to track down Lu Yi. Luck favored them at first, granting them ample chances and gifts. They hunted down cultivators from the Grand Sky Coalition, earning themselves a handsome amount of spoils in the process. Still, Lu Ye's whereabouts remained elusive, casting their quest for his head further into despair. If only those were the only difficulties they faced. But bad things come in threes. Just a day before, they came face to face with a powerful Grand Sky Coalition cultivator, and if the fact that his powers far surpassed them was not bad enough, the adversary even held a deep grudge against their sect. Needless to say, a fierce battle ensued. Their leader, 8th Order Lu Shu, possessed considerable strength, but he was still no match for the adversary, who was a 9th Order. Lu Shu should have been able to hold his ground under most circumstances. In fact, he could have escaped safely himself, if he really wanted to. But with the blood feud between the adversary's sect and their order, the enemy cultivator was determined to spill blood. That plus Lu Shu's resolve to keep the brothers safe forced him to stay and hold the enemy back while the brothers fled. By the time the brothers had reached a safe distance, it was too late. Lu Shu's battlefield imprint was gone. He was killed in combat. This left on the shoulders of the brothers the weight of guilt for causing the loss of their senior brother. Revenge was out of the question. The enemy Ninth Order's strength made it impossible for them to avenge Lu Shu, and all they could do was remain in hiding until the Colosseum reached its conclusion. Unfortunately for them, the enemy Ninth Order was not willing to stop there. He hunted around for their trail, tracking their movements and leaving the brothers in constant fear. With no other choices, they had to seek others for help. But anyone with enough power to resist the enemy Ninth Order was busy vying for the top spots on the Carnage roster. None of them were in a generous mood for charity, let alone altruistic enough to help keep the brothers safe. That prompted Jiang Liuzi to do everything he could to reach out to Tan Sheng. He was confident that the latter was strong enough to ensure their survival, plus, they knew how to make him say yes. Which was another stroke of luck. Not more than a day before, a white speck of light illuminated the spot where the Jiang brothers were hiding. It was an endowment event that had suddenly appeared right in front of them. It was from this pearly white speck of light that they stumbled upon a very extraordinary artifact. With this artifact in their possession, they were certain that Tan Sheng would undoubtedly agree to their request. The Jiang brothers expended every favor and dime just so that they could get into contact with Tan Sheng and were waiting for his response. Their hard work paid off. A message arrived soon enough. Jiang Liuzi quickly read the message. His brother Jiang Qingzi asked, "What's the news?" Jiang Liuzi nodded with solemnity, "It's a yes. But Tan Sheng is far away. The journey will take a half day by my reckoning." "That's good news, I guess. There is still hope for us." Few could fathom the joy and relief the brothers felt when they discovered what luck had just dropped on their lap in their hour of dire need. The very object of their salvation. Whether it was the rewards of winning the Carnage roster or the bounty on Lu Ye's head, the choice was easy enough for any Thousand Demon Ridge cultivator. Anyone would choose the latter without a moment's thought. For Tan Sheng, hunting down Lu Yi presented a twofold benefit. He could not only secure the top spot on the Carnage roster, but also the rich rewards for killing the famous Lu Yi. To that end, the brothers knew that there was little reason for him to decline to come. Tracking down Lu Yi had been the single most difficult challenge for all Thousand Demon Ridge cultivators who had entered the Colosseum with the express purpose of hunting him down. How could they even think of killing him when they could not even locate him? Yet, this quandary could be solved by the mysterious artifact that the heavens had just bestowed on the Jiang brothers. The uncanny ability to accurately pinpoint Lu Ye's current whereabouts was what impelled Tan Sheng to rush this way at once. Chapter 524, Exposed. A green-robed Tan Sheng arrived at his destination after his half-day-long journey. He had been full steam ahead all his way here, afraid that he might be too late. The Carnage Colosseum had been on for almost a half-month. That would mean that its end could come any time. If that were to happen, there would no longer be any point in trying to capture Lu Yi. The results of the Carnage roster would be determined by then, followed by the heavens' distribution of rewards. Tan Sheng extracted his map and ascertained his location. He was right. This was the place. He sent a message. It did not take long for a reply. He read it, murmuring its contents, "Where sun and moon do gently glide, twin rivers, hand in hand, abide." Deep inside, he scowled at the code with scorn, some lousy code. But as soon as he was finished, two figures stepped out of their hiding spots and came into view. His figure vanished with the winds, darting towards them and reappearing right before the two men in an instant. Jiang Liuzi stepped forward, his fists clasped in salute as he spoke. "Brother Tan Sheng, I presume?" The brothers had not met Tan Sheng before, hence they did not know what he looked like, but the secret code match and the spiritual power signature he emanated corresponded with what they knew about him. There was little chance for error. "You presume correctly," Tan Sheng nodded. "Where is it?" Jiang Liuzi took out an ancient-looking compass-like object from his storage bag. Exuding a timeless aura, the item looked just like any other ordinary object that most would rather just ignore without so much as a second glance. Yet this seemingly mundane compass held the key to accurately track Lu Ye's whereabouts, a significant opportunity that Jiang Liuzi and his brother had chanced upon. Hand it over. Tan Xing extended a hand. Though the item matched the descriptions of what he knew about it, he needed to verify it himself. We do not have a high cultivation rank, Brother Tan Xing, said Jiang Liuzi. And we have a formidable enemy cultivator still trying to hunt us down. It is for this reason that we need your help to keep us safe, sir. They couldn't surrender the compass to Tan Xing. Not without risking him giving them the slip as soon as he got a hold of it and leaving them to fend for themselves. There was no need to ask for Tan Xing's help to seek revenge for Lu Shu. Jiang Liuzi knew well the realm of impossibility that proposition inhabited. Tan Xing might be a powerful Ninth Order, but so was the enemy cultivator who slew Lu Shu. Even if Tan Xing were to agree to help, it would still be a very difficult undertaking for him to defeat someone of the same rank. Knowing that, Jiang Liuzi deftly refrained from mentioning this matter. They would take revenge by themselves one day. Both of them possessed exceptional talents, and the day where they would finally surpass the enemy in power and strength would surely come, and they would make him pay dearly. Lu Shu's death would be avenged then. In addition to our request for your protection, added Jiang Liuzi, we would like a 4/10 of the bounty on Lu Ye's head if this turns out to be a success. A cold glint flashed in Tan Xing's eyes. Your appetite is quite voracious, my friend. Are you sure of making such a demand? You know as well as I do the number of bounties offered by all the sects and orders in our coalition, Jiang Liuzi spoke with confidence. Such a vast sum of rewards. Even if you were to give us 4/10 of the share, it would still be enough to last you a lifetime. Almost every Thousand Demon Ridge sect and order, especially those of tiers 1, 2, and 3, had pledged enough rewards to make the total bounty unimaginably humongous. Tan Xing stared at the brothers pensively for several moments before he finally replied, "Surrender the item and you'll have my word." Jiang Liuzi shook his head. "I think it's best if we hold on to the compass ourselves." They needed Tan Xing to be around. Only that would dissuade the enemy cultivator from attacking them. If they gave Tan Xing the compass, he could zoom off without them, leaving them to be helpless sheep ready to be slaughtered. That would mean the end of everything they had worked so much for. To that end, Jiang Liuzi needed to be firm, even if it meant aggravating Tan Xing. At the very least, being fellow members of the Thousand Demon Ridge would prevent Tan Xing from just killing them both and running off with the compass. But Jiang Liuzi was nevertheless prepared for such an eventuality. If Tan Xing were to have malicious intentions, then Jiang Liuzi would not hesitate to destroy the compass. Seeing Tan Xing in doubt, Jiang Liuzi spoke again. The Colosseum has been open for almost a half-month now, Brother Tan Xing. Lose any more time and we might not be able to track down Lu Yi in time for you to regain your spot at the top of the Carnage roster. Especially since the conclusion of the Colosseum would mean that Lu Yi would be free to escape. Even with the tracking ability of this compass, he could be anywhere and we'll still not find him by then. Lu Yi could just as easily slip inside one of the many Divine Trade Association branches to evade capture, or he could just return to the real world of Jiuzhou. Finally, Tan Xing relented. 2/10, nothing more. You can have that ruddy compass to yourselves, but I'll stay with you both until the end. Jiang Liuzi did not like it at all, but he knew better than to argue. 2/10 of the whole bounty was nevertheless handsome enough for him and his brother. Very well then, he agreed. Let's begin, pressed Tan Xing anxiously. Jiang Liuzi lifted a hand and bit the tip of his finger. With the blood that oozed out, he wrote 3 large characters, Lu Yi, on the surface of the ancient and rustic compass. The arterial red trails on the surface of the compass vanished as if the object itself had consumed the blood, and it immediately emitted a faint glow. The pointer in the center of the compass began to spin wildly on its spindle until it finally halted, pointing in a certain direction. At the same time, a macabre speck of light, as morbid as claret, shot out of the compass and into the sky, streaking towards where it was pointing like a flaming comet. The compass, the real deal, Tan Xing mused quietly, his eyes alight with anticipation. With the help of this magical instrument, Lu Yi would have nowhere to run. Let's go! Tan Xing beckoned and soared into the air with the Jiang brothers peeling just behind. Somewhere on the ground, A lone figure was watching everything in silence. It was the Grand Sky Coalition Ninth Order who had killed Lu Shu. He had been hunting for the Jiang brothers, but they had hidden themselves so well that he could not find them. By the time he saw them, it was too late. They were joined by a Ninth Order elite, and that forced him to disabuse any idea of attacking. A Ninth Order elite whose face he knew well, and it was frustrating. Tan Sheng, he hissed quietly under his breath. Since when have the members of the New Moon sect and the sect of Celestial Dominion grown so close? Tan Sheng was a member of the former, while the Jiang brothers were members of the latter. Both sects commanded tremendous power and influence within the Thousand Demon Ridge Coalition. The Grand Sky Coalition Ninth Order failed to understand what instigated the sudden relations between the 2000 Demon Ridge sections. But he wasn't interested to spend further valuable time trying to kill a pair of Fifth Orders, so he decided to leave. Meanwhile, somewhere else in the Colosseum, a concealed Lu Yi frowned suddenly. For one fleeting moment, he trembled from an inexplicable sensation that swept through him as if he was being watched. A sensation that sent a chill down his spine. He relied on glyph, concealment to hide his presence, a way not dissimilar to how ghost cultivators disguise themselves. For all its flaws, it would take at least a Seventh Order to be near enough to notice him. Could someone be near? Someone near enough to have sensed his presence? He focused his spiritual senses, using glyph, insight on both his eyes, again, and confirmed that nothing unusual was around. But there was nothing. Not even the slightest trace of anyone being nearby at all. He paused to think, then he whispered Yi's name. She phantasmagorically came into view, and at his behest, she sank underground and began reconnoitering the vicinity. She came back almost a quarter of an hour later, shaking her head to Lu Yi. He had searched the whole place with a fine-tooth comb only to yield nothing. But that was not all. Even the strange sensation from before was gone as if it had never existed. Lu Yi was both shocked and apprehensive. Was that all just a figment of his imagination? He sat there quietly once more, regaining his composure before he projected his spiritual senses once more. There really were no signs of anything amiss. He had to admit that since getting the unique gold amulet, his luck had taken a dive. After almost a day, no one had passed by at all. Lu Yi looked up into the sky. He peered at the morbid red banner hanging high up in the ether. Tan Sheng's carnage points tally had not been changing at all for almost the entire day, giving enough chance for the second runner-up to catch up. At the moment, all that was needed was a mere 100 carnage points to unseat Tan Sheng from the second placing of the carnage roster. Minutes turned into hours, and after 2, the same feeling came back. Lu Yi could feel that someone was watching him, and the foreboding dread was palpably stronger than before. His expression tensed with solemnness. Something is definitely wrong. If it was just once, he could have brushed it off as a mere sense of illusion. But for it to happen again was something altogether different. He probed his surroundings with glyph, insight once more. Still he found nothing. But awash with the growing sense of foreboding, he felt exposed. If anything, it felt like a warning, urging him to leave before danger arrives. Lu Yi immediately sent a message to Li Baxian, urging him to prepare for a retreat. Even if it was just him being oversensitive, it was better to be cautious and not leave things to chance. Just as he was communicating with Li Baxian, 3 figures were rapidly approaching his location from several miles away, referring to the guidance of a compass that emitted a glow that was slowly turning into a deep crimson as they were closing in on their target. "He's close," Jiang Liuzi exclaimed, his eyes glinting with delight. Even with the compass, he had anticipated that the hunt across the vast terrain of the Colosseum would take quite some time. But to his amazement, they had managed to reach Lu Yi in just over an hour. What a fortuitous surprise. Lu Yi was just finishing his message to Li Baxian and was about to pack up his ward flags to leave when he noticed 3 streaks of light hurtling toward him. The leader exuded an incredibly powerful spiritual power of fusion, unmistakably a Ninth Order. Since when do Ninth Orders operate in teams? Lu Yi gasped with consternation. Then he realized from the spiritual power discharge of the 2 other cultivators with the Ninth Order that they were just a pair of Fifth Orders. So they might be members of the same sect. Why else would a ninth order be accompanying two lowly fifth orders? Lu Yi was half expecting them to just fly over his head. But before he could exhale with relief, all three men stopped overhead. Hovering in the sky above, Jiang Liuzi held out the compass, his gaze fixed on the trembling pointer jerking around. He growled, "He's just below." Tan Sheng's eyes lit up and he swiftly descended towards the ground, followed closely by the Jiang brothers behind him. They barely hit the ground when Jiang Qingzi vanished. As a ghost cultivator, it was imperative that he remained concealed for tactical advantage. Lu Yi was staring at Jiang Qingzi. He had met Wei Kei earlier, but he did not expect the Jiang brothers to be here as well. What a circus this had become! But what scared and perturbed Lu Yi the most was the compass Jiang Liuzi was holding onto. The same sense of foreboding from earlier seemed like a form of etheric connection between that compass and him. For reasons still unknown, Lu Yi couldn't shake off the feeling that they were here to find him. Why else would they have nearly flown past him only to stop overhead just now? Why of all places had they chosen to land here? The fact that Jiang Liuzi was referring to his compass as if he was looking for something, or someone, specific lent further credence to this theory. That you're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.